Hey guys, Chris again from ClassicBWBugs.com, and in this video I want to talk to you about fuel smell problem. Maybe after you fill up your gas tank or you go for a drive on the road and you got a fuel smell in your cabin or your bug. Well, I'm here to show you a couple tips on how to rectify that problem, hopefully. And let's get to it. Okay guys, so this is a 1967 Beetle that you see here. This is, I love the 67 and earlier Beetles. They're just simpler to work on. And especially when it came to, say, gas ventilation, emissions control. They did not get into the government regulation emissions control crap that came around in 68 and later Beetles. This is still very basic, very simple to work on. So if you do have a gas fume smell coming in through, say, the vents in your dash, like you see here, a lot of times you'll smell it, through the grills on the dashboard. Many times the first thing you're going to want to check before you do anything, and basic and simple, just to start easy, just check your gas cap. Just take this off and make sure you got a good gasket in here. If you don't have a good gasket in here, you're going to have, fumes venting off after a fill up and start getting into your cabin. It can get kind of annoying, and the smell can get kind of strong. So, and just also remember with these tanks, when you're filling up the tank, do not go past the neck. I generally keep a rule that when I'm filling up my gas, filling up my car, I just kind of top it off here. I never go all the way up here, because then you're going to have overflow. So then that gets us to the vent area on the neck. So 61 to 67 had this style of gas tank, this flat style tank, and actually had a vent that came off the neck. The earlier tanks didn't even have a vent yet. So when you get into the 50s or 60 and earlier Beetles, they didn't have a vent like this on the neck. But if your gas cap is good, the next place to check would be your vent here and your vent hose. Now, a lot of times either the vent hose here is cracked, it's brittled, it's breaking apart, or sometimes they don't even have a hose on here, or I've even seen people put a plug on this vent, which is not what you want to do either. So you're going to want to replace this hose and try to get the German hose, the braided hose like you see here. Many times you might go to your regular AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts or something like that and pick up any generic hose. It's not going to be the same. I mean, I would prefer to get the braided line. It was meant to be on this style of car. So now the one thing you also going to want to check is make sure you have this loop in your vent. These clips, these two white clips that you see here mounted inside the the trunk area here, is meant for that vent hose. So you have to loop that in order for it to function correctly. Many people will just go from here and exit out here, and it's not enough. You're actually supposed to make that loop. So the Germans did it for a reason, so do it the right way, and make sure you have enough hose that exits out here. A lot of people don't even know what that hose is. I've even seen people thinking that it's not meant to be there, and they go paint their car and they actually fill that, thinking that it was just a hose that somebody made later on, but that is factory, and you are supposed to exit the vent hose out. So give yourself enough hose that exits out, and you should be able to top off or stop that fuel smell in an early Beetle like this. And of course you want to check your engine compartment as well and make sure the fuel, if you do have a fuel filter in there, nothing is leaking in the engine compartment, because that smell can travel up through the heater channels, and if you have heat going on in the car, those fumes can also travel that way. But for the most part, I'm trying to focus on the trunk area here, where the most common smells come from. Okay, so here's a 1970 Beetle, and from 68 onward, government regulations came in and they had to start implementing emissions control on the Beetle, and they were starting to put on vent hoses, extra vent hoses, and even later Beetles from 71 onward, they would have evaporation canisters that were mounted inside the trunk and under the rear wheel well. But for the 70 Beetle, it's still kind of basic, but I just want to show you the main points of where you're probably getting a fuel odor problem. So from 68 on, this is where they started putting the gas door here. Now, just like I showed you on the 67, you're going to want to check that gas cap that's behind that door. And usually you open that door, there's a little lever under the dash here. You go right here, pull this little lever, this little handle. This pops open the fuel door. You want to check the cap here and see your gasket and make sure it's okay. And make sure that's closed correctly on there. And the gasket's not all corroded. That's the one spot. Now I'm going to take out the trunk liner here and show you where these later bugs are notorious for a gas smell. Okay, now here is the fuel inlet areas on your later style Beetle. Now, you can find this blowout on wolfsburgwest.com, and they sell all the material, all the hoses that you need to set this up correctly. So basically you have, here's where you're filling up your gas tank, okay, and has a neck here. You have a rubber hose here, you have a hard hose here, another rubber hose that then goes into the tank. Before I go any further, make sure to get these rubber band style sealer pieces that insert here between the big hoses where the clamps go. This is an extra protection to seal any vent and any fumes or any gas leakage. And then you have another braided breather hose here that goes to a T-line here, and you have another set of hoses, breather hoses, vent hoses, that then exit out and travel and exit out, you know, the gas, the car. Okay, so they even have another breather that goes here. So you can find on the samba.com where to actually route these things, but most of these hoses usually go up, you know, behind, you know, your breather box there, your air box. Okay, so I just ran them this way just to show you in the video what they're supposed to look like. But buy brand new braided hoses if you can. Now a lot of times what's happening is people do not change these hoses for years, and these hoses they can get porous, they can get soft, and they can start to break down, and they're going to emit fumes if they are not in good shape anymore. Sometimes there's no clamps. I can't emphasize enough, you got to have clamps on these things, and you got to have the right hoses to make this work right. If you just go to any auto parts store and get a generic hose, you might have some issues later on. So just make sure when you're if you're getting a smell, I would check these hoses and make sure they are not wet. I mean, you could just put your hands on and then smell your fingers, and you know, you could probably have a gas smell. You know, many times these braided hoses get moist and they start getting wet. So you definitely going to want to, you know, put clamps on things and, you know, buy a whole new setup. If you're just buying a car and you smell these fumes, you could buy the whole setup. It's really not that expensive from Wolfsburg West or CIP1.com. So definitely this is the area you're going to want to check on these later bugs. It's just notorious for a fuel smell. So, but make sure you have all these pieces too. I mean, there's blowouts online. Like I said, you got this breather here, you got a T plastic piece here, then you have a small hose that goes here, another T, and then two lines that come off that and then travel and exit out and vent to here. So just a refresher there. So that's usually the big case when it comes to the late style Beetles. Now 71 onward, they would have had a evaporation canister here. Super Beetles had a little bit different setup. They would then even have a plastic tube that breathes through by the dash, behind the dashboard. So it gets a little complicated, and you know, there are sources online to look into this. So if you have any questions, you can email me, chris@classicvwbugs.com, or visit my website, www.classicvwbugs.com. Take care.